There's quite a bit going on in chapters 22, 23, and 24. Lots of plot advancement. So one morning, on his way to town, Mr. Pontellier stops to see a doctor, Dr. Mandelet, who is a semi-retired physician who is sort of advising people when they have questions about their health, but he's not really a practicing doctor anymore, which that tells me he's maybe a little bit out of touch. So Mr. Pontellier goes to see him and immediately starts talking about Edna. So he acknowledges to the doctor that he himself is not sick. I think it's funny how he describes himself. He's a man of tough fiber. You know, the Pontelliers just die of old age. They don't have any illnesses. He's here to talk about Edna. And the doctor says, well, my goodness, what could be wrong with her? I just saw her on the street the other day and she was a picture of health. And Mr. Pontellier acknowledges that, yes, she does look well. She seems well, but she's acting odd. She's not herself. And so the doctor asks for some details. And Mr. Pontellier says he's, disturbed because she's letting the housekeeping go, which means that she's not herself doing the housekeeping, but she's not managing the housekeeping very well. Also probably not the cook, if you remember from a previous chapter. He also says her whole attitude has changed. And he admits to the doctor that he's getting angry with her and frustrated. And he says, I have a quick temper, but I don't want to quarrel or be rude to a woman, especially my wife. So he's acknowledging that he's been snapping at her, that he's been scolding her, that they're not getting along. He says she's got some sort of notion in her head concerning the eternal rights of women. And he's like, we meet at the breakfast table. This is what we talk about. And so he's uncomfortable about that whole topic. And this is interesting. The first thing the doctor says is, what have you been doing to her, Pontellier? Which makes me wonder if the doctor is asking if he has been sexually cruel to her or doing something to make her feel less of a human, like being demeaning or making her feel trapped. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm not doing anything. And then the doctor says, well, has she been associating with the pseudo-intellectual women, the super spiritual superior beings his wife has been telling him about? And this is referring to women's clubs. So just as a reference, I mentioned the fact that on Grand Isle, Mr. Pontellier goes to Klein's where the men hang out. Here in New Orleans, he belongs to a club, and clubs were typically for men. And during this time period, women started creating their own clubs. And it was a way for them to get together, obviously, and be social, but also to talk about issues that concern them. And this was the growth, really, of the women's movement. You think about feminism that really takes hold during the modern age. It began in these clubs. It's one of the places it began. And Mr. Pontellier says, well, no, actually, she's not seeing anybody. She's not having her Tuesdays at home. She's not visiting anybody else. She walks around the city by herself. She gets in after dark. It's peculiar. Then the doctors think he's trying to brainstorm, what could be wrong with Edna? He's like, well, is it something hereditary? Something about her family that's peculiar? Maybe she's taking after someone in her family. And Mr. Pontellier says, no, she comes from sound old Presbyterian Kentucky stock. So again, this is a reference to class, to upbringing. The Protestant church, this was the backbone of early America. And so this is what he's referring to. These are solid people. Her father is a gentleman. They were Kentucky farmers. And he even says, like, her sister is getting married in a couple weeks. And then the doctor has an idea and he says, oh, we'll send her to the wedding. Since her family is such good people, maybe if she's with her own people for a while, it will help her. And Mr. Pontellier I mean, he has an answer for every suggestion the doctor is making. He says, well, she refuses to go to the wedding. And he says, when I told her to go, she said she won't go because a marriage is the most lamentable spectacle on earth. And Mr. Pontellier says, nice thing for a woman to say to her husband. Fair. I mean, that is rude to say to your husband. And then the doctor says, well, leave her alone. Just don't bother her. Don't let her bother you. Like, don't engage. Just coexist. Keep things calm. A woman is a delicate organism, is how he describes women in general. Sensitive and highly organized women, such as I know Mrs. Pontellier to be, can be especially peculiar. It would require an inspired psychologist to deal successfully with them. And when ordinary fellows like you and me attempt to cope with their idiosyncrasies, the result is bungling. Most women are moody and whimsical. This is a passing whim of your wife due to some cause or causes which you and I needn't try to fathom, but it will pass, especially if you let her alone. Send her around to see me. And she says, oh, I couldn't. Like, he couldn't justify it. How would he tell her that she needs to go see a doctor? And then the doctor says, well, then I'll come and see her. And so they arrange that he will come for dinner on Thursday. So very well, Thursday. He says, my wife may possibly have some engagement for me Thursday. In case she has, I'll let you know. Otherwise, you may expect me. This is what the doctor says. Then before he leaves, Mr. Pontellier adds another detail. So these are some important plot twists that are going to be impacting the next few chapters of this story. He says, I'm going to be going away to New York on business very soon. I have a big scheme on my hands and want to be on the field proper to pull the ropes and handle the ribbons. We'll let you in on the inside if you say so, doctor. So he's basically saying he has a money-making venture, and if the doctor wants in on it, he'll let him. And the doctor says, no, I'm too old for ventures like that. And so he says, okay, but I'm going to be absent for a while. And so he's asking if he should take Edna with him. He's concerned about leaving Edna alone. And the doctor's advice is no. If she wants to go, fine. If she doesn't, leave her. Don't contradict her. The mood will pass. I assure you, it may take a month, 2 or 3, maybe longer, but it will pass. Have patience. The doctor would have liked during the course of conversation to ask, is there any man in the case? Of course, this is the obvious thought, right? If a woman is acting strangely, is it because she's having an affair? But he knew his Creole too well to make such a blunder as that, because that would be highly offensive to Mr. Pontellier. So he keeps his mouth shut about that, but it's a reasonable question. He did not resume his book immediately, but sat for a while meditating and looking out into the garden. So clearly this doctor is very much just like a good advisor. He doesn't really know a whole lot. And he's also definitely a product of his time, because there was an assumption that women like Edna did have something a little wrong in the head. There were books and sort of guidelines about, the women's psychological issues, but they weren't very developed. So then we have a transition, and I'm assuming it's just by a day or two at the most, because we still haven't had the doctor come for dinner. Edna's father is in the city, and he had been with them for several days. She was not warmly or deeply attached to her father, but they did have certain tastes in common, and they got along well. His coming was in nature of a welcome disturbance. It seemed to furnish a new direction for her emotions, so she enjoys having him around. He had come to purchase a wedding gift for his daughter, Janet, and to get himself the clothes he would be wearing for the wedding. It's interesting. He really does trust Leonce Pontellier in terms of selecting the bridal gift and in terms of selecting what he will wear. So Edna's father really does want style advice from her husband because, he's kind of more of a country guy, and Mr. Pontellier is a city man, and he knows what is fashionable. Plus, he has a lot of money. So For the past few days, the old gentleman had been upon Edna's hands, and in his society, she was becoming acquainted with a new set of sensations. He had been a colonel in the Confederate Army and still maintained with the title the military bearing which had always accompanied it. So even though he's quite older, he still sort of has that military air. His hair and mustache are white and silky, which emphasizes how tan his face is because he's someone who's out in the sun all the time. He was tall and thin and wore his coats padded, which gave a fictitious breadth of his shoulders. So he looks more muscular perhaps than he really is in his old age because of the way he dresses. The two of them look very distinguished together. And, remembering too, Edna is very tall and lanky and long. She has sort of long, angular arms and legs. And so she definitely has a look about her that is similar to her father's. And people notice them during their perambulations. So I underline this word because that's probably not a word you've ever seen, or at least not very often. Perambulations basically means walking around as they're out and about in town. Also, a baby buggy used to be called a perambulator for walking a baby. Upon his arrival, she began introducing him to her art studio and sketching him, and he is very interested in being sketched. He sits very still. He's very serious about the fact that his daughter is drawing him. He even doesn't like it when the kids come in because it's going to somehow distract her and make it difficult for him to sit so stiff like he needs to. He's very, very dedicated to helping her with her art. And he does believe, that she must be talented just because of how hard she is working. Edna, anxious to entertain him, invited Mademoiselle Reyes to meet him, having promised him a treat of her piano playing, but Mademoiselle Reyes declined the invitation. And I wrote here, predictable. No way is Mademoiselle Reyes going to come to her fancy house and basically, be the entertainment for her father. We all know Mademoiselle Reyes has a lot of boundaries, especially when it comes to what she will do for other people. And what she will do for Edna is not the same as what she would do for Edna's parents or other family members. So together they attended the musical party, the little soiree that the Ratignolles have every 2 weeks. If you remember earlier in the book, they have this sort of every 2 weeks, they have people over and they bring their instruments and they play music. So they made such a fuss of Edna's father. And Madame Ratignolle flirts with him. When it says that she coquetted him, that's to flirt in the most captivating and naive manner with eyes, gestures, and a profusion of compliments until the colonel's old head felt 30 years younger. So it makes him feel like a young man again because she is so flirty with him. Edna marvels, not comprehending. She is not a woman who flirts. There were 1 or 2 men whom she observed at the soiree musicale, but she would never have felt moved to any kiddish display to attract their notice, to any feline or feminine wiles to express herself toward them. So she's incredibly direct as a person. She does not manipulate. So she doesn't understand Madame Ratignolle's behavior. Her fancy selected them. She's attracted to these men maybe in their personality, and she was glad when there's a lull in the music and she could talk to them. So this is showing me that she's looking at other men. Often on the street, the glance of strange eyes had lingered in her memory and sometimes had disturbed her, so she knows men look at her, but she's not chasing after other men. Mr. Pontellier did not attend these soirees. He considered them bourgeois and found more diversion at the club. So what that means is that to him, they are contrived. So contrived, when you're talking about decoration or a social occasion, is kind of like a try-hard move. Like you're just trying too hard to be something unique or special, when in fact he feels like what they're doing is pretty ordinary and middle class. So he's very judgy about this. And Madame Ratignolle is equally judgy of his club. She doesn't think that's very cool either, and she even tells him so. So they definitely, even though they're all friends, they definitely judge each other in terms of how they choose to spend their social lives together. She even makes a comment to Edna that it's a pity that Mr. Pontellier doesn't stay home more in the evenings, because maybe if he did, they would be more united as a couple. And Edna disagrees. She says, we wouldn't have anything to say to each other. She had not much of anything to say to her father, actually, either. But he did not antagonize her. So even though she and her dad don't have a whole lot to talk about, at least he's not pestering her and making her feel bad. So there's another reference here that while he's visiting, the Colonel drinks a lot. So the Colonel, just as a reminder, is Edna's father. Toddies, I mean, this could be referring to just cocktails, but generally toddies, when we talk about them today, are like hot bourbon drinks, like tea with bourbon or cider with bourbon. It's a hot alcoholic drink. But it could be any number of things. And it does say he was an expert at concocting strong drinks. So it's certainly a cocktail that is strong. He had even invented some to which he had given fantastic names and for whose manufacture he required diverse ingredients that it devolved upon Edna to procure for him. So she's running around buying all kinds of special things so he can make his fancy cocktails. So finally, it's Thursday, and Dr. Mandelet comes to the Pontelliers, and he doesn't see anything wrong with Edna at all. In fact, he's really impressed with how she talks with her father. They talk about their whole day. They went to the horse races. They were betting on the horses. In fact, Edna had staked her father on his last venture with the most gratifying results to both of them, so they made some money. Besides, they had met some very charming people, according to the Colonel's impressions. And so it seems like Edna's being very social. She's going to the racetrack. She's meeting all kinds of new people, which doesn't really line up with what Mr. Pontellier said about her, walking lonely around the city. Mr. Pontellier has no interest in horse racing. So he is very set apart socially from a lot of the other things that their contemporaries are doing. And he even says so, that he doesn't like it very much, which creates some tension a little bit between her father. But Edna warmly espoused her father's cause, and the doctor remained neutral. So, you know, they kind of get into an argument, but Edna supports her dad in liking the racetrack and the horse races, and it sort of ends, and there's no tension of any significance. The doctor is watching Edna the whole night and just looking for some evidence that there's something wrong with her. And all he can see really is that she is warm and energetic and that she's palpitant with the forces of life. She reminds him of some beautiful, sleek animal waking up in the sun. I'm sure he's jealous to some degree and wondering why Mr. Pontellier doesn't appreciate her. That's just me saying that. That's not actually specifically said here, but it's a natural thought. Like when he sees her in this way, he's like, I mean, she's amazing. The dinner was excellent. So clearly she's been doing a better job with the cook. The claret was warm, which would be a red wine, and the champagne was cold. And under their beneficent influence, the threatened unpleasantness melted and vanished with the fumes of the wine. So everyone's getting a little tipsy and everyone's getting into a better humor. Mr. Pontellier warmed up, and so they start telling stories. Mr. Pontellier tells stories about the plantation where he grew up in his youth, how they would hunt possum. The Colonel talks about hard days when they had difficult weather, when maybe, you know, farming was difficult during the war. There's just a lot of sort of stories that they share here. Edna has her own story to tell. It's interesting. I'm just going to read this a little bit here. The doctor tells a story. He tells a story of the old, ever new, and curious story of the waning of a woman's love, seeking strange new channels, only to return to its legitimate source after days of fierce unrest. So this is a little message to Edna, like, oh, you know, this is a story I love, you know, about a woman who, you know, loses her love and for her husband or for her lover and goes into new directions, but then ends up coming back. That's obviously what he wants her to do. And Edna is unmoved by this story, and instead she tells her own of a woman who paddled away with her lover one night in a pirogue and never came back. So predictable, right? Like, she doesn't want to be held back or held down by the current conventions. They were lost among the islands. So she tells this whole story about these lovers that get away. The champagne was cold. Its subtle fumes played fantastic tricks on Edna's memory that night. Outside, away from the glow of the fire and the soft lamplight, the night was chill and murky. The doctor doubled his old-fashioned cloak across his breast, and he strode home through the darkness. He knew his fellow creatures better than most men, knew that inner life which so seldom unfolds itself to unanointed eyes. He was sorry he had accepted Pontellier's invitation. So I think this is worth noting. And this could be a quiz question. How does the doctor feel when he leaves the dinner? He's disappointed. He wishes he hadn't gone. He was growing old and beginning to need rest and an unperturbed spirit. He did not want the secrets of other lives thrust upon him. Like, it's too much. He's had enough. He was drinking, probably not what he wanted to be doing at his age. Now he has to walk home. He hears all this drama, it's just too much. He's like, I'm done with this. And then he mutters to himself, I hope it isn't Arobin. I hope to heaven it isn't Elsa Arobin. Who? This is a new name. It's okay not to know who this is. Foreshadowing. We're going to find out later. A lot of times authors will give you something you don't really know what it's all about. We will find out for sure. So he's still thinking, like, she's got somebody, right? He can't imagine that's not the case. That's what I'm inferring here. In chapter 24, Edna and her father had a warm and almost violent dispute upon the subject of her refusal to attend her sister's wedding. Of course, at some point this has to come up. Mr. Pontellier declined to interfere, to interpose either his influence or his authority. He was following the doctor's advice to let her do as she liked. The colonel reproached his daughter for a lack of filial kindness, like kindness to your family, and in not showing respect. Her want of sisterly affection, her want of, meaning like she doesn't have it. She doesn't have affection for her sister. She's not considering her sister's needs, womanly consideration, human consideration. His arguments were labored and unconvincing. He doubted if Janet, that's her sister, would accept any excuse, forgetting that Edna had offered none. Of course, she's just like, I don't want to go. I'm not going. He doubted if Janet would ever speak to her again, and he was sure Margaret would not. Edna was glad to be rid of her father when he finally took himself off with his wedding garments and his bridal gifts, so she's had enough of him. Mr. Pontellier follows him closely, and he says that he will come to the wedding on his way to New York and endeavor by every means which money and love could devise to find some way to atone for Edna's action. So he's like, I'll give an even better gift, because she's being so rude. And the colonel scolds Leonce. He says, you are too lenient. Authority and coercion are what is needed. Put your foot down. Good and hard, the only way to manage a wife. Take my word for it. The colonel was perhaps unaware that he had coerced his own wife into her grave. So Mr. Pontellier has now gotten two opposing bits of advice. Leave her alone, let her do what she wants, or have a firm hand. So this poor man is confused. Edna was not so consciously gratified at her husband's leaving home as she had been over the departure of her father. So her father's leaving, now her husband's going to leave. As the day approached when he was to leave for his comparatively long stay, she grew melting and affectionate, remembering his many acts of consideration and his repeated expressions of an ardent attachment. She was solicitous about his health and his welfare. She bustled around, looking after his clothing, everything. She's trying to help him get ready, kind of acting like Madame Ratignolle would have acted with her husband. She cried when he went away, calling him her dear good friend, and that she was quite certain she would grow lonely and go join him. So it's interesting. I'm wondering if this is a show or if it's genuine or maybe a little of both. I mean, she's never been left alone like that before. I think we can infer that to be the case. After all, once he's gone, a radiant peace settles upon her. The children are even gone. So Leonce's mother, Madame Pontellier, had come and taken the children with their nurse back to her home. The Madame did not venture to say she was afraid they would be neglected during Leonce's absence. She hardly ventured to think so. She was hungry for them. She misses them. These are her grandchildren, and even a little fierce in her attachment. She did not want them to be wholly children of the pavement, meaning like she didn't want them to only grow up in a city. She always said that they needed to have some space. She wanted them to know the country with its streams, fields, woods, so delicious to the young. She wished them to taste something of the life their father had lived and known and loved when he was little. So she wants them to experience, their family way of living, which is out in the country. So Edna is 100% alone. It's just her and like the house staff. So she breathes a genuine sigh of relief. She walks all through the house, all around the house. Here's that word again, perambulated around the outside of the house, walking around, investigating everything. And she sees everything like it's for the first time. Everything seems new to her. She sits in chairs as if she's never sat in them before. She admires the flowers like she's never seen them before. Everything is fresh and full of promise when he is gone, and the kids too. Even the kitchen assumed a sudden interesting character which she had never before perceived. She went in to give directions to the cook, to say that the butcher would have to bring much less meat, that they would require only half their amount of butter and milk and groceries. She told the cook that she herself would be greatly occupied during Mr. Pontellier's absence. I wonder what she'll be doing. And she begged her to take all thought and responsibility of the larder upon her own shoulders, which means that she asked the cook to just make all the decisions about the food and getting the groceries and everything else. That night, Edna dines by herself with a great candelabra with candles lit and no other lights on. Outside the circle of light in which she sat, a large dining room looked solemn and shadowy. The cook placed a lovely meal. It was tenderloin with a lovely sauce. She has good wine. She was a little sentimental about Leonce and the children and wondered what they were doing. But then she gave a dainty scrap or two to the doggy. I've never heard about the dog. She talked intimately to him about Etienne and Raoul. He was beside himself with astonishment and delight over these companionable advances, because she's paid no attention to the dog before, and showed his appreciation by his little quick, happy barks and lively agitation. Then Edna went to the library after dinner and read Emerson. Again, like an enlightened author, these are books and authors that were helping guide sort of the ideology of society until she grew sleepy. She realized that she had neglected her reading and determined to start anew upon a course of improving studies now that her time was completely her own. So she's going to read more. After a bath, she goes to bed. As she snuggled underneath the elder down, a sense of restfulness invaded her, such as she had never known before. So she is completely relaxed and happy.